You know, guys, as a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe over the span of the last nearly 12 years, I have always kind of been curious about the future of the franchise of the Incredible Hulk, right? We had a couple movies that came out. We know he's been in a bunch of ensemble films, but the character himself has kind of been in this weird limbo, this weird, kind of stasis in regards to a solo movie. But we have a little bit of news on that today. But first, before we dive into that, I think we do need to go back and look at the history briefly of trying to get the Hulk on the big screen. And first things first, we got to go back to 2003's Hulk, Ang Lee's Greek tragedy, that while potentially looked at well by critics with 62% on the Rotten Tomato score, the audience did not like it at 29%. And I don't blame them. This movie, in my mind, has not aged well. It's 16, almost 17 years old. Still hasn't aged well. So a couple years down the road, when Feige took over Marvel Studios and Feige wanted to bring about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they did Iron Man, then they did the Incredible Hulk, which was based off of the original TV series starring Lou Ferrigno, and I thought this was a much better movie, a much greater entrance into the MCU, overall just a better film than Ang Lee's version. It felt more in line with what we'd want to see versus just a comic book adaptation told through the lens of a Greek tragedy. And that one did better with the audience, right? 70%, and the critics a little bit better at 67%, but it didn't blow up anywhere near as well as Iron Man. In fact, both Incredible Hulk and the Hulk did roughly about the same amount of business, around $260 million worldwide, which just kind of shows you that there is a limiting aspect to the Hulk in general. But now we kind of have to ask ourselves the question, who really owns the rights to the character? And that is one that is now being, kind of drug into the light a little bit. But first, CNBC here reports that although Marvel owns the character rights to the Hulk, Universal owns the rights to any solo picture. Back in the early 2000s, when the two Hulk movies were released through Universal, Marvel had not yet been acquired by Disney, and a deal was struck, when the deal was struck in 2009 for over $4 billion. So Universal has the rights to a solo movie, but Marvel has the rights to the character. It's a weird setup. And as far as I know, it's in perpetuity, but that could change because according to MCU Cosmic's Jeremy Conrad here, he says through a new rumor that Marvel Studios may have gained full control of the Hulk and Namor. And that is quite interesting given some news that broke yesterday. And I'm going to talk about that. But first, let's look at the article here. He says, one big obstacle Marvel Studios has faced for its entire history involved the complicated rights issues surrounding the Hulk and Namor. While Disney is free to use the Hulk in any team-up movie, they couldn't realistically produce a Hulk solo film due to complications surrounding the distribution of the movie. Despite common belief on the internet, Marvel could have always made a solo Hulk movie, but the chances of Disney actually distributing it and profiting off of the money that went into it were slim. That's because Universal held the right to first refusal for any solo Hulk movie. They had first dibs at distributing it, and only if they passed would Disney be free to release it themselves. But who would pass up the potential billion-dollar opportunity that comes with an MCU movie these days? But that obstacle may not be an issue anymore. So before we go into it, I just kind of want to point at one other little thing that we know that might cause Disney to actually work with Universal on this one, right? Considering how the other movies have done, they actually maybe stand to not lose as much money because we have the Spider-Man in Sony and Marvel deal over Spider-Man. The one that started in 2015, that one that skyrocketed up on the internet when it fell apart back in August of 2019. And now we have a new deal that was cut a month after that whole fiasco in order to keep Spider-Man in the MCU. And here's the thing, is the first two movies that got put out by Sony, Marvel produced them, Sony footed the bill, and they made very little money on the deal whatsoever. So while it wouldn't have been the same deal with Universal, Marvel is not above striking deals with other studios to get these characters on the screen. It's interesting when you really think about it, right? Because they've done this sort of thing before. So Jeremy I think he's omitting this part. He'll argue maybe semantics, but this is still a nice generalization. Anyway, back to the article. He says, and he wants to make sure that he's only putting this out there as a rumor, not as fact. But I've heard from someone very reliable that Marvel has gained full control of Hulk and Namor, so those pesky distribution hurdles no longer exist It's very doubtful they'll ever do a solo Namor movie due to the success of Aquaman, but they'll use him as both a villain and a potential future Avenger. And I'd like to actually just quickly kind of point out on that one right there. I think that's a load of crap. $1 billion movies what Aquaman got. If they can turn Namor into a badass, it could also be $1 billion movie. We're at a point now where Marvel movies are basically all guaranteed to be $1 billion, provided they can get the character hyped enough to be able to do it. If they can slingshot it around bigger movies, it's guaranteed to hit $1 billion. Look at Captain Marvel. So I think, again, this is one of those things where it's like, oh no, they're not going to touch it due to Aquaman. Feige likes to mess with DC. We know this. Conrad knows this. I don't know why he's going to ignore it. He's kind of a blind like MCU fanboy, really, but that's how it is. Anyway, he also says here that this could explain why Kevin Feige invited Ruffalo to pitch ideas for the Hulk. If they could now make and distribute a solo Hulk movie on their own without worrying about Universal, then it would make a lot of sense to see if there's any ideas out there for such a thing. True, but I don't think those ideas were for a theatrical film. I think those ideas were for a Disney Plus series. Now, Feige did also say that the chess pieces that were very intentionally left the way they were following the events of Avengers Endgame, which means that there's a lot of future for the big green guy in the MCU. And if this rumor turns out to be true, he could potentially get another solo movie someday. And again, I don't think it's a solo movie. As we've seen with the 2 attempts thus far, even in the MCU, distributed by Universal, but still part of the MCU, it didn't do very well. Would it do better now than it did in 2008? Yeah, because the popularity, obviously. The built-in fan base, obviously. It's not as experimental as it was back then, obviously. But still, I don't think it would do as well I just think it would do better as a show. Hulk and She-Hulk, they could make it work. But anyway, we have this funny thing, too, because this kind of came up a while back about Namor. Right? Boss Logic put out this particular fan poster, Black Panther 2 Kings. And it had a lot to do with that one line in Avengers Endgame where Okoye was talking about there being a disturbance in the ocean, and people were like, oh, it's a Namor reference. Well, the writers were like, no, that's just a coincidence. But they could tie it in now. They could absolutely tie it in now, and they left it open for themselves to do so. Nothing in those movies ever really makes it in without there being a double, triple check. So I think that line did have some purpose to it. However, what I find to be fascinating here when it comes to the subject of Namor is everything to do with Mikey Sutton. Now, Mikey Sutton and Jeremy Conrad don't necessarily see eye to eye when it comes to reporting on scoops. In fact, Jeremy's kind of been like firing shots at Mikey recently for some of the scoops that he had. But while Jeremy was out there saying that the Spider-Man deal was done, it was dead, Mikey was saying that the deal was good and ready and that it was going to be fine. And ultimately, Mikey came out on top on that one. So there's a bit of a beef there between scoopsters and scoopsters. And the reason why I bring it up is yesterday, Mikey dropped some intel regarding Namor and the Illuminati, that this was something that Marvel was potentially working on in regards to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And so what that basically means is that they're going to introduce Namor in that particular film. And again, take it with a grain of salt, but if you want to get more intel on it, you can always head over to my video where I actually talked about this. And I broke it down a bit more, and that's something there just to consider, but I wanted to put it out there. So if Namor does pop up, that could be something that now they're working on. And I just find it interesting that Mikey dropped it the day before this information dropped. So there we have it. But at the end of the day, when you start looking at the Hulk as a character on the big screen, he's done better in an ensemble than he has on his own, right? Avengers Age of Ultron, Thor Ragnarok, Infinity War, and Endgame. I mean, he's been around in a bunch of movies and people like him quite a bit, but that's part of an ensemble. And I'm thinking we're getting to a point where some of these solo movies are not going to do as well. And by as well, I mean like really breaking $1 billion. I still don't think that Ant-Man 3 is going to break $1 billion. I don't. I really don't. But I mean, most of the movies are definitely going to go to that route, provided they could really beef it up. And the team up movies are probably going to be the better ones. As I've been saying for a long time now, given how many characters Marvel has to play with, the acquisition of the Fox characters and everything else, now if they have the Hulk and Namor back on in, it's just more characters all under Kevin Feige's control. And he wants to bring them out as fast as he possibly can. He wants to get them in the lexicon as fast as he possibly can. So big team up movies or ensemble films or things like that are going to be a really good way to start making that a reality. And I think that's what we're going to find coming out of Feige going forward. So this is just, it's just a rumor, right? It's just an internet rumor. We don't know anything good, bad, All right, I appreciate Conrad's work, even though I think he gets a bit salty in regards to criticizing my friend Mikey Sutton, who's been nothing but generous and kind. And I think I think Mikey's onto something with the Namor thing potentially. And now this pops up. It just kind of we start to kind of get a little bit of rumblings. I mean, it really does make us want to ask the question, how much of this is potentially true? Now, we don't know, and we won't know until there's an official announcement from Kevin Feige, 100%. But in the meantime, it's fun to speculate. It's fun to talk about what stories could be there, what stories could be told, and how they'll make it work. I mean, this is a machine. This is an unstoppable machine. And where it goes next is going to be really fascinating. And the characters they pull out, I think, are going to be really, really, really big. And a lot of them are going to be fan favorites, like Hulk and Namor. Anyway, your thoughts and your opinions. I am curious to know your thoughts on this one. Let me know down in the comments below. If you made it this far, type Namor into the comment section so I know that you made it. And hit that like, hit that subscribe, smack that bell. And if you want to really help support the channel, and I mean like really, really, really support it, try $1 from patreon.com, right? Just $1 per month really does help out the channel, keeps it going, keeps the lights on, keeps my kids fed. Guilt. And I'll talk to you guys later. Have yourself a great day and peace out. Hey, thank you very much for watching the video. If you want to keep the conversation going, and if you made it this far, you clearly do, come on in and join the Discord. Link is in the video description. Can't wait to see you there. Have yourself a great day and peace out.